Well, my name is James Wilson Miller, and I'm been elected as a senior elder of the Gringai clan of the Wonnarua Nation within the Hunter River Valley. I was born in Sydney, so I have a birthright in Gadigal country, as a lot of us people do who were born there. So I was brought up not so much with a lot of Aboriginal culture around me, but I was brought up in a loving environment. We didn't live in a house. We lived in a kerosene tin and hessian bark humpy on a hill overlooking the town of Singleton, about 2 or 3 kilometres east of Singleton. I was brought up with my grandmother and my 2 older aunts, who were not that much older than me. And the only time that we got to see other kids was when I went to school. I didn't have any Aboriginal studies when I was going through school. I didn't know anything about Aboriginal people except my own mob. If I did get anything, it was from my great-grandmother, old Harriet. And she first told me what a Koori was and all that. And my grandmother, stop talking to him like that, Harriet, will you? You shouldn't know those things. Oh, be quiet, Jean, he's got to know these things, you know, all that sort of thing. Even though I went all the way through primary school, I only spent about 7 or 8 months, I suppose, or even a year in high school. So I was very much undereducated to that degree, and the only jobs that I could find were menial jobs, factory work, process work, council worker. I was working in a little place called Wilcannia, and the headmaster came over to the place where we were living, and he had these forms in his hand that he was showing my late ex-wife, and it was an application to go to the Armidale College of Advanced Education. I laughed. I said, what me, become a teacher? I said, I used to run away from school and the truant officer and all those sorts of things. He actually helped me fill it out, because I never filled out any forms before in my life like that. And he sent it away, and lo and behold, a couple of weeks later, I got a reply saying that I was accepted for an interview at Armidale. A couple of months later, or a month or so later, I got a letter saying I was accepted to become a school teacher at the Armidale College of Advanced Education. And for a person trying to better himself to becoming a school teacher, you have to go through some very hard times, and many times we had to call on the government to give us rations. It was hard, but through the help of my former late wife and a few close friends and family, I eventually hung in there and got through. So apart from my children being born that I had then, that was probably one of the most happiest moments in my life. Yeah, I made it. And then I eventually got, in 1983, a full year at the Armidale City Public School as an infants teacher. My first posting was to an all Aboriginal mission school, would you believe? They were 2-teacher school. And my classes were kinder, first, second and third. So all in the one room. And they were nearly all related to one another, and the teacher aide was mother, auntie, sister to many of the kids in my class, or even in the school. I stayed there for about, I don't know, just on 2 years. I ended up getting a job at the Armidale Teachers College, from where I was trained, and that was where I stayed for the next 10 or 11 years. And based on the information that I was using in my program then, we ended up building an Aboriginal school-based Aboriginal Studies program, which could be taken to any other school. All you'd have to do was change the tribal group or the clan group or the language group, and the whole program would pretty much work in that if you were doing it for an Aboriginal school. I got a lot of knowing a little bit more about my people by reading history, by getting myself interested in Australian history as a whole, and in time looking at, well, why were my people treated like they were? I was getting as much information as I could about my people for projects, for assignments. A lot of my assignments in sociology and all that, and history within those, I applied them to my people. So and most of my assignments that I wrote were a lot of the early content that started me into writing Koori Will to Win. My writing didn't come to fruition until I was in my fourth year. I was doing a postgraduate diploma in Aboriginal Studies, and then a lot of my writing was starting to come together. It had shape, it had depth, it had meaning, and I'm thinking, wow, I still needed a bit more help. So I applied for a grant to get some money to help me research a little bit more, and I finally got a grant from the New South Wales Premier's Department Literature section. I did a lot of research with the Institute of Aboriginal Studies in Canberra. That's where I got a lot of information about the Wanneroo people. So I'm glad I've done that. So I've done something that I think, you know, my grandkids, my great-grandkids could possibly read or something like that. I was seeing a mind person, a psychologist, and about issues that was happening within my psyche and all those sorts of things, and I probably wasn't in a good place, and I suppose I went to so many dark places too. And I felt at that time I needed a change. A lot of things were happening for a good 2 years in my life at that time, and I suppose I needed a break. I looked at the Koori Mail, and here's this position, Aboriginal curator at the Powerhouse Museum, a new position, and blah, 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 you know what I mean? So, oh, yeah. I said, that's my job. That's my job. And there, so I spent 18 and a half years at that place. It was a good job. There was a different thing to do every day. I remember we did about 25, 26 major exhibitions, and then probably the same amount in temporary exhibitions. We were part and parcel of sending over an exhibition to Greece for the Olympics, and I remember going to Beijing. I believe that Aboriginal culture should be taught in schools. To teach Aboriginal culture, I believe Aboriginal culture should be taught outside of the classroom. Oral history, you know, is a good thing, is a powerful thing for Aboriginal people, and elders today have got to have those sorts of skills about them to be able to relate those oral history skills on to future generations. It's a responsibility of elders to do this. With your knowledge, with an elder knowledge, you can make them proud of who they are. With your knowledge, you can give them identity. With your knowledge, you can give them aspects of their culture that they may not know. You can give them, if you know, the song lines, the story lines, the traditions that you may know and how you got to know them. Well, that's your way. And hopefully all elders around New South Wales will be able to do that, you know, because, you know, passing on knowledge that gives an identity, that gives the reason for being, that gives the reason for why your land is like it is, you know, is something, you know, and I've said it before, it's a responsibility of all elders to pass on what they know.